My name is Evelyn Carter, and I was 38 years old when I finally understood that some families don't push you out with anger. They do it with silence. If someone had looked at family photos from my childhood, they would have thought I grew up in a happy home in the quiet town of Ashford, Vermont. My parents smiled for every picture, my younger brother Ryan always stood proudly in the center, and our house looked warm every Christmas. But pictures never show who is standing just outside the frame. That person was always me. One of my earliest memories is Christmas dinner when I was 7 years old. My mother spent the whole day decorating the dining room with candles, red ribbons, and fresh pine branches. The long wooden table looked beautiful. I counted the chairs because children notice little things adults ignore. There was one chair for my father, one for my mother, one for Ryan, two for my grandparents, one for my aunt, and one for my uncle. I looked around again because I thought I had counted wrong. There wasn't a chair for me. I stood quietly near the doorway until my mother noticed. She smiled gently, placed a plate in my hands, and said, "Sweetheart, we're short on space today. You can eat in the kitchen. It's only for tonight." I believed her because children always want to believe their parents. The same thing happened the next Christmas. Different guests came, but somehow there was still no place for me. Year after year, someone else always had my chair. I stopped asking questions because every answer sounded kind, yet every answer left me alone. My parents never shouted at me. They never called me names. They simply treated me like someone who could always wait until everyone else was finished. That quiet rejection hurt more than anger ever could. Ryan's life was completely different. Whenever he wanted something, he got it. New bicycles, expensive birthday parties, the latest video games, summer camps, and later his first car before finishing high school. I learned very early that if I wanted anything, I had to earn it myself. By the time I was 12, I cooked simple meals, washed my own clothes, packed my school lunch, and even helped clean the house. I secretly hoped that if I became useful enough, my parents would finally look at me with the same pride they looked at Ryan. That day never came. There was one strange object in our house that nobody was allowed to touch. It was an old wooden box sitting on the highest shelf in my parents' bedroom. Every December my mother would take it down, lock herself inside the room for an hour, and cry. Whenever I asked about it, she simply said, "It's part of our family history. You'll understand one day." I stopped asking, but I never stopped wondering. When I turned 18, I left home with 2 backpacks, $700, and an old blue sedan that barely started on cold mornings. Nobody tried to stop me. My father wished me good luck without looking away from the television. My mother hugged me politely and said, "Call us when you settle somewhere." Ryan barely noticed I was leaving. I drove away feeling strangely calm. It hurt, but it also felt like freedom. I moved to the city of Brookhaven and accepted every job I could find. I cleaned offices at night, washed dishes in a restaurant during weekends, and helped elderly people with housekeeping whenever someone needed extra hands. Many nights I slept inside my old car because I couldn't afford rent. During winter I wrapped myself in cheap blankets and promised that one day I would own a home nobody could take away from me. One afternoon an elderly widow thanked me for cleaning her house so carefully. She said, "You don't clean houses. You take care of them." Those words stayed with me. A few months later I registered a small business called Evercare Home Services. At first it was just me, a used vacuum cleaner, a bucket, and a second-hand van. Slowly my clients recommended me to neighbors. More people called. Then apartment managers called. Soon I hired my first employee, then my second, then my fifth. While my business slowly grew, my connection with my family became smaller every year. Sometimes I called during Christmas hoping things had changed. Every conversation felt exactly the same. My mother always sounded busy. Ryan was always surrounded by friends. My father always said he would call me later, but he never did. Eventually I stopped expecting invitations. A cousin named Laura occasionally kept me updated about the family. Ryan had started 3 different businesses, and every single one had failed. Each time my parents emptied more of their savings to rescue him. They refinanced their house twice, borrowed money from relatives, and convinced themselves they were simply helping their son get back on his feet. Ryan never seemed worried because someone always solved his problems. By the time I turned 36, Evercare Home Services had become one of the most trusted property management companies in the county. We looked after vacation homes, handled move-outs, maintained estates for elderly owners, and managed dozens of expensive properties. I had 15 employees, several company vehicles, and enough savings to finally fulfill the promise I had made to myself years earlier while sleeping inside my car. That promise was simple. One day I would own a beautiful home where nobody could ever tell me there wasn't room for me. In the autumn of 2025, I found it. It stood on a quiet street called Willow Ridge Lane. A 3-story colonial home built almost a century earlier with white columns, tall windows, and a wide front porch. Most buyers ignored it because it needed expensive repairs, but when I walked through the empty rooms, I didn't see broken walls. I saw possibilities. I imagined a long dining table filled with people who genuinely wanted to be there. I bought the house with money I had earned myself. The day I signed the final paperwork, I looked at my name printed across the ownership documents again and again. Evelyn Carter. Sole owner. Nobody had given me this house. Nobody had rescued me. Every dollar represented years of sacrifice. For the first time in my life, I finally felt like I truly belonged somewhere. I believed the hardest years were finally behind me. I had no idea that buying that house would make my family remember I existed after almost 20 years of silence, and that someone had already started making plans to take everything I had built with my own hands. A few weeks after buying the house on Willow Ridge Lane, something changed. My phone, which had stayed mostly silent for years, suddenly became busy. My mother called twice in 1 week asking how I was doing. My father left me a voicemail saying they missed me. Even Ryan sent me a message asking about my new house, how many bedrooms it had, how much I had paid, and whether the property was completely in my name. I answered politely but shared very little. After nearly 20 years of being treated like an outsider, their sudden interest didn't feel like love. It felt like curiosity with a purpose. My cousin Laura called one evening and quietly told me Ryan's latest business had collapsed. He owed nearly $80,000 to private lenders, and this time my parents couldn't rescue him because they had already borrowed against their own house more than once. That's when everything started making sense. They hadn't remembered their daughter. They had remembered my success. A few days later my mother invited me to spend Christmas Eve with the family. She spoke so warmly that anyone else would have believed every word, but I remembered every Christmas dinner I had eaten alone. I thanked her and said I would think about it. The next morning Ryan texted again. You should keep important papers like your house deed somewhere safe. Do you have a home safe or something? I stared at the message for a long time. He wasn't worried about me. He was trying to find out where I kept my ownership documents. Instead of confronting him, I quietly took screenshots of every message and saved them in a folder. Years of running a business had taught me that records are often more valuable than arguments. My instincts told me something was wrong, so I contacted the real estate attorney who had handled my home purchase. Her name was Rebecca Lawson. I explained everything, including Ryan's strange questions and my family's sudden kindness. Rebecca listened carefully before asking one simple question. Is your house completely debt-free and solely under your name? I answered yes. She became silent for a moment before explaining something that completely changed the way I looked at the situation. She told me about property deed fraud, where someone creates fake documents, forges an owner's signature, files them with the county, and tries to transfer ownership illegally. Even more shocking, she explained that these crimes are often committed by relatives because they already know personal information about the victim. She immediately advised me to register for the county's free property fraud alert system. The service would notify me if anyone ever recorded documents against my property. I completed the registration that same afternoon and stored every confirmation email safely. Then Rebecca suggested something else. Don't accuse them yet. If they're planning something, they'll become more careful. Let them believe you trust them while we quietly prepare. It was difficult advice to follow, but deep down I knew she was right. Over the next few weeks Ryan became more confident. His messages slowly changed from friendly to demanding. One evening he wrote, "That house is too big for one person. Mom and Dad are getting older. A family home should belong to the whole family, not just one person." Another message arrived 2 days later. "You left years ago and forgot where you came from. Maybe it's time you gave something back." Every message strengthened my suspicion. My sister-in-law Ashley also called one evening pretending she needed advice because she and Ryan were supposedly transferring property between themselves. During the conversation she casually asked whether the county actually verified signatures before recording ownership documents. The question sounded innocent, but I immediately understood why she was asking. I pretended not to know anything about the legal process and told her my attorney had handled everything. She seemed relieved. After hanging up, I added another screenshot to my evidence folder. By early December my mother called again. While talking about Christmas she suddenly said, "That beautiful house would be perfect if the whole family lived there together. Homes like that shouldn't belong to only one person." The sentence sounded harmless, but I heard the real meaning behind it. They weren't planning family dinners. They were imagining themselves living inside my house. A few days later the notification I had feared finally arrived. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing employee schedules at my office. The email subject read, "Property fraud alert, new document recorded." My hands became cold. I opened the email and read every word carefully. A quitclaim deed had just been recorded against my property. According to official county records, ownership of my house had been transferred from Evelyn Carter to Ryan Carter. I had signed nothing. I immediately drove to Rebecca's office. She requested a certified copy of the recorded deed. The forged signature looked similar enough to fool strangers but completely different from my real signature. Rebecca quietly placed the papers back on her desk and looked at me. "They've crossed the line now," she said. "This is a felony." Instead of panicking, I felt strangely calm. Years of being ignored had taught me patience. Rebecca contacted the police, and that afternoon I met Detective Michael Grant. I handed him every screenshot, every voicemail, every suspicious message, and the certified copy of the forged deed. He carefully reviewed everything before nodding slowly. "I've investigated property fraud before," he said, "but very few victims arrive this prepared." After hearing the entire story, Detective Grant explained that while the forged deed itself was powerful evidence, it would become even stronger if Ryan actually attempted to take possession of the house. Then he asked a question that immediately made everything clear. "Your family invited you for Christmas Eve, didn't they?" I nodded. "If they believe you're away from home that night," he continued, "they may try to move into the property and change the locks before you realize what's happening." For a long moment neither of us spoke because we both knew exactly what would happen next. My family had spent years believing I was always alone during the holidays. That belief was about to become the biggest mistake of their lives. On Christmas Eve, I made sure everything looked exactly the way my family expected. My car was parked several streets away, every light inside the house was turned off, and from the outside the place looked completely empty. But inside, everything was different. Detective Michael Grant and 2 police officers were already waiting in the dining room, hidden from the front windows. Rebecca Lawson sat quietly beside them with copies of every legal document, while a local newspaper reporter named Emily Brooks stood upstairs with her camera ready to document everything. I sat alone in the dark living room, holding the original deed to my house and the property fraud alert confirmation that had warned me weeks earlier. Around 9 o'clock that night, headlights slowly entered my driveway. I heard car doors close, quiet footsteps across my porch, and then Ryan's voice laughing with confidence. He told everyone the house was empty and said everything would be over in a few minutes. A locksmith placed his tools into my front door and began working on the lock. My mother sounded nervous and quietly asked if they were doing the right thing, but Ryan immediately replied that the house legally belonged to him now and that they were simply taking possession of their own property. A few seconds later the deadbolt clicked open, and my front door slowly swung inward. Ryan entered first, proudly holding the forged deed in his hand. Ashley followed him carrying a flashlight while the locksmith stepped inside with his toolbox. My parents entered last, looking around the beautiful house in complete silence. Ryan laughed and said, "I knew she never deserved a house like this. She never belonged here anyway." The moment those words left his mouth, I reached beside my chair and switched on the living room lamp. Bright light filled the entire hallway. Ryan froze. Ashley stopped walking. My parents stared at me in complete shock. Before anyone could speak, Detective Grant calmly walked into the hallway with the two officers behind him. Rebecca stood beside him holding the certified copy of the forged deed, while Emily quietly photographed every second of what was happening. Ryan's face immediately lost its confidence. He looked around the room and realized he had walked directly into a trap. He shouted that the house belonged to him and waved the forged deed in the air, but Detective Grant calmly asked him to lower the document because it was now evidence in a criminal investigation. Ryan tried to blame everyone else, claiming he believed the paperwork was legal, but Ashley remained completely silent because she already understood there was no escape. The locksmith quickly explained that he had only been hired to change the locks and had no idea the ownership documents were fraudulent. After listening to everyone, Detective Grant placed Ryan under arrest for forgery, filing fraudulent property documents, and attempting to illegally take possession of real estate. Ashley was also arrested for her role in planning the scheme. As the officers placed handcuffs on Ryan, my mother began crying and begged me not to destroy the family. She kept saying that families forgive each other and that everything could still be fixed. I looked at her calmly and replied, "For 20 years there was never a place for me at your table. Tonight I finally built my own home, and the only guests you brought were the police." She lowered her head because she had no answer. My father quietly sat down on the staircase and admitted that he had always known I had been treated unfairly but had never found the courage to stop it. He finally told me the truth about the small wooden box I had seen throughout my childhood. Before I was born, my parents had lost their first baby daughter shortly after birth. My mother never recovered from that loss and spent years comparing me to the child she had lost instead of loving the daughter she still had. Hearing the truth explained my childhood, but it did not excuse it. I quietly answered, "You lost one daughter, but you chose to lose another while she was still alive." My father couldn't respond. In the weeks that followed, the court declared the forged deed completely invalid, and full ownership of my house was officially restored. Ryan accepted a plea agreement after overwhelming evidence proved his involvement, and Ashley also pleaded guilty for helping plan the fraud. Both received felony convictions that permanently changed their lives. My mother never faced criminal charges because investigators couldn't prove she had participated in creating the forged documents, but after the story appeared in the local newspaper, everyone in town learned what had happened. My father began writing me handwritten letters every month, apologizing for years of silence. I read every letter, but I wasn't ready to answer them. The following Christmas, I placed a long dining table beside the large windows of my home. Every chair was filled with people who had truly supported me over the years, my employees, close friends, kind neighbors, and my cousin Laura. For the first time in my life, nobody was left standing alone. I finally understood that belonging is never something another person gives you. Real belonging begins the day you stop waiting for someone else's invitation and start building a place where you are already enough.